Hello and welcome to this new video workshop where I will demonstrate how you can knit these lovely kittens with your circular knitting machine. You need a circular knitting machine with 40, 44, 46 or 48 needles. I will explain the pattern for every machine and I will demonstrate every single step. You need, of course, yarn. I'm using a crochet hook, about 5.5 or 6 millimeters. Not for crochet, but for the hook. I'm using a pair of scissors, of course, a yarn needle, some stuffing, and optional, you can use rattles. And I'm using safety eyes. They are not safe, but you can also embroider the face or leave it out. So, that's it. Of course, yarn, some scrap yarn, but that's basically it. And yes, about an hour or an hour and a half, and then your kitty is finished. So hey-o, let's go, let's begin. For the kitty, you have to knit 3 different pieces. I will demonstrate them all, but you have to write down the pattern for your machine. When you have a machine with 40 needles, you have to knit a tube with 38 rows, that's that one, and a tube with 15 rows. And you have to knit the tail, and that's about 45 to 50 rows. When you have a machine with 44 needles, like the Pre-Maxi or the Michaels, you have to knit the following pattern: 44 needles, you have to knit a tube with 40 rows, a tube with 16 rows and the tail, and that's also 45 to 50 rows. When you have a 46 needle machine like the Addi King size, you have to knit the following pattern for the 46 needle machine. You have to knit a tube with 42 rows, a tube with 17 rows, and the tail exactly the same as the rest, 45 to 50 rows. The next pattern is for the Centro-like machines with 48 needles. You have to knit a tube with 45 rows and a tube with 18 rows, and of course the same tail with 45 to 50 rows. Now you know your pattern belonging to your machine and you have to follow your pattern. In the next steps, I'm going to demonstrate how to knit the tubes and the tail and how to assemble the kitties. So have fun, enjoy, and you will be surprised how simple this project is. Hello and welcome to this quick scrap yarn workshop. In this workshop, I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can add and remove your scrap yarn in 1 second and can reuse it over and over. First, I'm going to start to knit with my scrap yarn a couple of rows. And then I'm going to change to another color of scrap yarn. I'm just cutting my yarn, putting it to the inside between the last and the first needle. And then I take another piece of scrap yarn and put it into my feeder, also between the last and the first needle. Make sure that the tails are long enough to reach the table. And knit 1 round, so every single needle has to pick the color once. I'm cutting my yarn and putting my tail between the last and the first needle, as every tail I have used. And then I'm taking my working yarn. I'm hanging a long piece of thread inside my machine because I'm going to use it to pick up my stitches and do whatever I want to do with them. I'm going to demonstrate to you how I like to close my tube. But first, you have to put your yarn between the last and the first needle. And then you are going to knit. So what have we done? We have started with scrap yarn, changed to another color and knit 1 round with scrap yarn. And now I'm just knitting my desired pattern. That's not interesting because that's for a special project. And now I'm finished. I'm cutting my yarn a long piece because I want to use it to close my tube. I'm taking it out of the feeder between the last and the first needle again. And then I'm going to put my scrap yarn into my feeder between the last and the first needle. And I'm going to knit one round. See? Just the same place all the time between the last and the first needle. One round, so every needle just picks the yellow color in this case one time. I'm taking it out of the feeder and I'm taking another piece of scrap yarn. And I'm going to knit a couple of rounds with the scrap yarn. And after knitting a couple of rounds, there are no rules. I'm just cutting my yarn and knitting until my work drops from the machine. So I'm continue cranking when my yarn runs out until my project comes loose. Now I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to close the tube. I'm using my crochet hook. I'm using 5.5 millimeter, but some people like to use thicker or thinner needle. It doesn't matter. It's what you like and what fits your work. So I have knitted my work. I'm stretching it. And now I have both ends with scrap yarn. This is why I changed my color. I'm going to take out all of the ends. And I'm looking for the working yarns. They are a bit tangled because I took a little bit too long ends. But better safe than sorry. And now you can easily recognize your stitches. You have to look at the stitches in the color of your working yarn between the scrap yarn pieces. And there are 22 stitches or 46 or 48 in the round. And I'm going to close them by pairs. So on the right I have all those tails and now I'm going to find my last and first stitch. You can easily recognize them because we have the pieces of yarn hanging at the end, the first and the last stitch. This is my first stitch. I'm poking my needle in from the outside to the inside, and then I'm going to find the last stitch where the working yarn is coming out from, and I'm poking in from in to outside. That's my first pair. In total, I have to connect 11 pairs. So that's easy to see. And when I'm done, I can remove my scrap yarn in a second. I'm finding my working yarn and I'm going to pull through the yarn through both loops. And then I'm going to pick up the next pair and pulling the yarn through all loops on my hook. I do that for all the 11 pairs. Keep counting them so you won't miss anything. I speed up my video because this is not where the workshop is for. But you can see me doing this in many workshops that are coming up. So I already have about 60 different project and instruction videos. You can find them in my Circular Knitting Machine playlist on my channel. When I have to find my last pair, I just poke them out a little bit. And now it's finished. Oh. My tube is closed. I'm making a single stitch. And now I'm ready to remove my scrap yarn. We knitted with the yellow, or I knitted with the yellow one round, and I'm just going to pick up that lonely piece of yarn and I'm pulling just at that one single strand. And this is where the magic happens. You can just pull it out of your work and you can reuse it. And then you can take off the big piece of scrap yarn. You can just reuse it, and my tube is closed. I will demonstrate it again for the other side of this tube. But first I'm going to stick in my yarn end. So, finished. At the other end, it's exactly the same. Make sure that all the pieces of yarn are on the outside and untangled. Find yourself the first pair. It's where the scrap yarn starts and begins. I took a real long piece, so find your 2 stitches. You can easily find them because we have the pieces of yarn going through. This is my working end, this is my last knitted stitch, and this is my first stitch. So I'm picking those 2 stitches up and I'm going to close the tube. This is my first pair, and the next 10 pairs I have to do the same. I will speed up again. And I'm almost finished, so I'm going to find my last and 11th pair of stitches to close. And then the fun part comes again of removing the scrap or waste yarn. Very quick and ready to reuse. I'm going to pull out that one piece of strand. And there is the rest, and it's finished. And that simple is it to use scrap yarn and remove it, and don't throw it away. In this next step, I'm going to demonstrate how to knit the tail. You are going to cast on 5 stitches. This is my 5th stitch, and make sure that your yarn is under the bump on the left of the 5th stitch. So I've casted on 5 stitches and I made sure that the yarn is always under those bumps, and then your work should look like this: under, over, under, over, under, and under the bump. And now you're ready to knit flat. Knit slow back and watch the yarn sliding off the bump, and when it slides off, give a little tug on your yarn so the loop around the needle is nice. Then crank slowly further until you have knitted the last stitch and the yarn slides off the bump, and then you stop immediately. Crank back, watch the yarn sliding off the bump, and then give a little tug. Crank until the yarn slides off the bump next to the last knitted stitch. When it slides off, you stop and then you crank back. Watch the yarn sliding off that bump and then give a little tug. Crank all the way. Make sure that every loop is down around those two little teeth. Crank further until the yarn slides off the bump next to the last knitted stitch. Turn, slide, tug, crank, help, slide, crank back, help, slide, crank back. You always stop at the moment the yarn slides off the bump left or right from your knitted stitch. It's just like taking corners. You just go back and forth, making sure you turn at the exact same spot every time. When the yarn slides off, crank back. When the yarn slides off, crank back. And crank about 45 to 50 rows. 1, 2. Every turn is a row. Every turn is a row. And so simple is it to knit flat. It's just like knitting with regular knitting needles. When you have knitted the last stitch, you turn. And when you're done, when you're finished, you can just cut your yarn long enough that it touches the table, and then we are going to cast off our flat panel. I'm just cranking without knitting, so I put my yarn to the inside, making sure that all the loops are completely down. And now they are released. I'm cranking a little bit further so that I can pick them up, that you can see them. I find my yarn end, I stick it into my needle, and I start picking up the stitches far from my last knitted stitch. There are only 5. I put them on my needle and I pull through the yarn, and then I stretch my work and I pull also at the casting on tail. I find my shortest tail. And I'm going to make a knot in the fabric. And the shortest tail is at the shortest end of the fabric. And I'm going to lace it through the edge of the tail to the knot. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lace it just across the edge of the piece through the knot. See, just stick my needle through. I'm pulling and stretching so that it's even with my knitting, and now I'm going to make a little knot around my work, making a half knot, but you can make a knot whatever knot you like to make. And then I'm sticking my needle through the knot in my work, and I'm going to cut my yarn, and my tail is ready for assembling. So let's go to the next step. In this step, I'm going to show you how you can close this piece of knitting into a hat. First, you have to fold it over and take a piece of yarn into a yarn needle. And we are going to close the two sides that we casted on and casted off. So we are going to close the top and the bottom, and the side we leave open because we are going to use our hat like that, and this is going to form the neck later on. So for now I'm going to use the V-stitches that are closest to the edge. Look, this is a V-stitch. That's the V that's formed like this, and you see they're all lined up next to each other. See, here's the next one, also a V-stitch. and also a V-stitch, and we're going to pick up those V-stitches on our needle. So I picked up my first V-stitch as much as possible at the corner here, as the V-stitch just below the casting off side, and I'm pulling my yarn needle through, and then I'm going to do exactly the same at the opposite side. I'm going to pick up the V-stitch on the outer side of the opposite side, and I'm pulling my yarn through. Make sure that the yarn runs over your work and not below your work. Then you go to the first side again, and you are going to pick up the next V-stitch. So you're poking in just next to the where you came out, same in the same hole, and you're picking up the next V-stitch. And pull through your yarn. You don't have to pull it close. Then you go to the opposite side, go in where you came out, pick up the next V, the stitch that looked like this, pull through your yarn, then go to the opposite side, find yourself the next V-stitch, pull through the yarn. It's going to look like you have been to surgery. And you continue doing this until you are at the corner. Just picking up those V-stitches. And when your yarn is not long enough anymore, you can just pull it. And this is your seam. You see that I use a blue color. You can just pull your yarn back and forward, and you just keep continuing picking up the next V-stitches. And when you're done, you just pull your yarn and you are going to join the end into a knot. I'm just making a little half knot around my needle, but you can use whatever method you prefer to close or to join this piece of yarn, and make sure it doesn't come loose again. And then I stick my needle to the inside and pull through that yarn end, and this is how I made one side. Do that also to the other side. Finding my V-stitch. Those are the V-stitches, so the upper V-stitch from one side and the V-stitch on the other side. And then continuing picking up those V's. When you want to use safety eyes or sew-on buttons, this is the moment to do that. Safety eyes are never safe. Because the fabric you knit is too wide, too loose. Then I'm going to take one of those ends or a new piece of yarn, and you are going to make a line around by going under and over those vertical bars you find under your V-stitches. So you're just lacing through all the way around. Just continue doing that also on the opposite side. And then you can stuff the head. Make sure you don't put stuffing in the ears. And then you can just pull the yarn and join those two ends into a knot. Make sure you don't pull it too tight, just tight enough to close the hole. And then you can tuck in your ends. You just put them into your yarn needle, put them to the inside where the knot is, and let them come out somewhere else. And cut those ends. And that's how you make the head. So let's continue with the next step. You can give the cat a mustache. I have just a piece of black yarn into my yarn needle. I'm putting it into the back of the head and let it come outwards next to the nose. And then I'm going to embroider a few whiskers. On both sides of the nose. And when I'm done, I'm going to put my needle through the same hole on the back where I stick it in at the beginning. Pulling through, making sure that everything is in the right place. And then I'm just going to knot those two tails on the back. Don't pull it too tight, because then you will pull back the whiskers. Just make a simple double knot. Then put both yarn tails into your needle and stick them to the inside through the same hole you came out with, and put it to somewhere else. And pull it to the inside. And so it's safe, secured and gone. So you can make whiskers, but you can also make whiskers by pulling through some yarn and join them like this. That's also a way of making whiskers. So you can leave them, embroider them or knot them on. Over to the next step, joining the body part into a body. Before I'm going to show you how we are going to join the body part into a body, I have to explain. You have knitted this part with a 40 or a 44 or a 46 or a 48 needle machine. Okay, we are going to join our V stitches, those V stitches, to our bars. We are going to join this side to this side, and our bars are, when you watch at a line with those V stitches, and you stick a needle in the track, then you will see those vertical bars. I draw them here, those vertical bars, and we are going to join them to those V stitches on this side. How we are going to do that, I'm going to explain, but you have to remember what machine you used. Did you use a 40 needle machine? You have to remember the number 10, 44 the number 11, 46 the number 11, and 48 the number 12. Yes? Okay, that's about it. I'm going to join with a different color so you can see what I'm going to do. You can use your own color. And as I already explained, I'm going to join the edge that you just closed to the other edge, the side of your tube. And we are going to do that by folding them over and joining those bars to those V stitches. Okay, we already learned about those V stitches. You can do this at every corner, so why don't you start with a corner with the V stitches watching you, and then you fold over the back. So you have the V stitches in front of you, and you have the vertical bars lined up. Yes? Okay, you have to find your first V stitch. They are next to each other, so that should not be a problem. Stick in your needle in that first V stitch. I left my yarn on the skein. So okay, this is what you have right now. Then you are going to stick in your needle where you started it. So this is the piece coming from my yarn here. You are going to stick in your needle again into that same spot, picking up 1 vertical bar. So we did 1 V-stitch and we picked up in the same hole 1 vertical bar. Pull through your yarn, but do it loose, not all the way. Then when you pick that 1 vertical bar up, you are going to pick up your second V-stitch. It's just next to the one you just picked up, and you pull through your yarn. Make sure that your yarn loop goes over your work. So then you go to the opposite side and you pick up 2 vertical bars by going in where you came out, and you pick up in the same track 2 vertical bars. And your work is going to look like you've been to a surgery. Okay, the plan is that every time you pick up a V-stitch, you pick up 1 or 2 bars. You always go in where you came out and pick up 1 or 2 bars. You're alternating that. In the same time, you have to count your V-stitches, because depending on your machine, you have to do this for 10, 11, 11 or 12 V-stitches. It's about those V-stitches, these numbers. 40 needle machine, you have to join 10 V-stitches to 1 or 2 vertical bars. 1 bar, 2 bars, 1 bar, 2 bars. So you just continue doing that, alternating, picking up 1 or 2 bars, and make sure that you stay in the same track. So I did 3, so now I'm going to do my 4th, and that's my second bar. Sorry, that's my second time I did 2 bars. Then I'm going to pick up my 5th bar, picking up 1 V, picking up 1 bar, my 6th V, make sure that the end is at the end, picking up 2 bars, my 7th V, picking up 1 bar, my 8th, 2, 9, 1, 10, 2, 11, 1. I have to do 12 because I made this with my big machine, and I have to pick up my last 2 bars. So, and now I'm just going to pull my yarn. You can pull it both sides. So, and that's the closure of one leg. So that's for now. You just leave that tail and you cut this end also, and you are going to do that for the rest of the legs also. So I'm going to do that also for this side. So I'm going to have to join this one to this one, but now my V-stitches are at this side and my vertical bars are at this side. That's not a problem. I find my first vertical bar. Yes. Pulling through my yarn, and then I'm going to find my first V-stitch at the opposite side. And I'm pulling through my yarn. So now we're doing 2 bars. And the second V-stitch. Then 1 bar and the 3rd V-stitch, 2 bars and the 4th V-stitch, 1 bar and the 5th V-stitch, 2 bars and the 6th V-stitch, 1 bar and the 7th V-stitch, 2 bars and the 8th, 1 bar, 9, 2 bars, 10, 1 bar, 11, 2 bars, 12, and then you are going to do that also at the other side, but there's a little bit difference. Oh, wrong. Because you have to use the same track you used at this side for joining. So you just follow that track all the way to the end, so you know that you are going to start in the right track. So at this one I also have to do bars, 2 V-stitches, and that's my 3rd leg. And then I'm going to join that 4th leg all the way around, and then I continue directly by joining the middle. So I forgot a few stitches while I was explaining, so I have to finish that last 2 stitches. So okay, so now I'm going to join my 4th leg. I'm making sure that I'm using the same track I used to join this one. So it's this track. I have to start here. But I'm starting now at the V-stitch side, so I have to remember this stitch. Yes, I have to remember this stitch. And I have to pick up my first V-stitch. And then, I hope this was this stitch, okay. First V-stitch, 1 vertical bar, second V-stitch, two vertical bars, third V-stitch, 1 vertical bar, fourth, 2 vertical bars, and continuing that all the way to here. Two, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, and now I'm going to put some stuffing in the legs. You don't need much stuffing. Don't stuff it, don't overstuff. Don't put stuffing in so much that you will overstretch or stretch your work. Just put in some stuffing that it just holds its form. And then I'm going to continue. It's best to go through the holes where you went through already doing the other leg. So go through those holes again. Then you will close it very neat. So I'm going to put my needle also through these vertical bars where my yarn already went through closing the other leg. So, and now you see that you have a nice closure. And what we are going to do now is that we are going to join those two tracks to each other by just going in where you came out and find those vertical bars and join them 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, whatever you like. 1, 2, 2, 1, 1. Pull through your yarn. Put some more stuffing in. And continue closing by joining those two tracks to each other. Make sure that you stay in the same tracks. That will give a nice closure. And you can cheat, you can smuggle when it doesn't fit all the way. You can just smuggle a little bit. I also go through where I already went through, you see. And I also do that on the other side. And then I just have to pull my yarn. This is where it started. Oh, I made a hula loop going the wrong way. So. And I just simply am going to knot all those tails here. Just simply knot them to each other and pull through that knot or pull tight that knot, not too tight. Make another knot. Also close. Remember that you have to use your same color yarn to close. And then you will not see those stitches you will see now, because I'm using a real contrasting yarn to show you how invisible you are going to close. Stick your needle in where all those tails came out. Stick it through your work and pull through to the inside and cut those ends at the other side. So now next step is to close this part. When you pull, you see it's already nice and neat. When it's not, you just make a little circle through all those parts, and then you make a little knot and you close this part. After knotting the way you like it, you just put it to the inside, let it come out at the other side, pull through and cut that end. And now we have to finish those 4 ends, and that's very simple. Make sure that everything is nice and same, looking the same, and then you are just going to join that end into a knot where you ended it. I'm just using a half knot, and then I'm going to stick it to the inside. Let it come out somewhere else, and I'm pulling it to the inside, but not too tight. And then I'm just cutting that end, and I'm doing that with all 4 legs. And the next step is joining the head. For that, I'm going to put my yarn into my yarn needle, a long piece of yarn, and I'm sticking it to the bottom of my work and let it come out to the front. Make sure you leave a tail, and then you stick your needle through your head, making sure that you come out in a real open spot. And then you pull through the yarn and you stick your needle in the same hole to the back and let it come out somewhere else. And then you will see that it will disappear on this side, but it will grab the stuffing on the inside, and then you stick it through your work again to the back, let it come out somewhere there, and then pull the head to the body. And then you are going to continue sticking in your needle where it came out, all the way through the head, pulling through, making sure that everything goes okay on the inside, and then at the head stick your needle again where you came out, all the way through to a complete different spot to the other side, and continue this doing this until you think that your head is joined nice to your body. Make sure you keep on looking that nothing is misplaced. And when you think you're done, you just stick your needle again through the head, through the body, but come out in the same spot where you started. So those two ends are in the same place. And then you just simply knot those two ends. Take your yarn needle and stick them through your project. Let it come out. And then we only have to join the tail. I'm using the longest end of the tail. I decide where I would like to have it, and I just stick my needle to the inside, let it come out at the bottom, and then continue doing what I was doing also with the head. Just join the tail make sure that you join it very good, so that it doesn't come loose very quick. And when you're done, you're just going to knot that tail, that yarn tail I mean. I'm always making a half knot, pulling my yarn through that knot, but you can use whatever knot you like. Stick your needle also into the body, pull through, cut your yarn, and the family grows. So this is how you make these little kitties. I hope you liked my workshop. If you want to see more of my free workshops, check the playlist in the description of this video. You can also join my channel so you can see more videos. Give me a thumb up, subscribe. I also have different social media. You will find everything in the description below this video. I say thank you for watching. With love from Holland. Stay safe and keep on crafting. Bye bye.